from the American Gulf Coast, it's the Dave Nemo Show.
Always look forward to talking to old friends on the program. Well, he's not old, but he's a friend, Tim Aschoff, President and COO of Crete Carrier, and, of course, Schaefer Trucking. And Geoff Humphrey is joining us as well, along with Tim. Geoff is the Director of Dedicated and Regional Fleets, and this wasn't planned, but if it was planned, it would have been planned exactly like this, because the topic today with Tim and Geoff from Crete is what impact is technology having on trucking now, today, and what do they kind of see in the future, and what types of technologies are a go, and which types of technologies are a no. And Tim Aschoff, morning.
Good morning. Great to be on the show again.
Oh, as always, great to have you back. And Geoff is new to the program, so I thought maybe you would do the honors and introduce Mr. Humphrey to our listeners.
Sure. Geoff's been a key member of our team, has been on board with us and started out in our operations group and has evolved to his current role, which, as you mentioned, involves dedicated and regional fleets. But as a part of that, certainly technology and how we operate any of our fleets is a big part of what we do. And Geoff's been an integral part of our team. And looking at technology that you don't, particularly maybe drivers out there don't hear about as much, but we in the trucking company world have to look at and say, what can we use to continue to make our drivers, be safe out there, be productive out there, and how we operate. And so Geoff's been a key part of that for our team in vetting out that technology, seeing which technology can help us, and then implementing it here in the back office, so to speak, that's sometimes invisible to the drivers, but certainly trying to help them be productive and get the miles they need every day out there on the road.
Geoff, welcome. First off, good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Hey, I'm glad to have you. You know, you talk to a lot of folks that kind of do what you do at Crete Schaefer, and what are some of the underlying reasons that the folks who make purchase decisions in terms of technology, whether it be safety, whether it be back office, telematics, logging, whatever the technologies are, what are some of the motivating factors that you hear from your friends in the industry?
Yeah, I think a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, the thing that we always look for is how does this improve maybe a process or efficiency. So, looking for ways to maximize, daily productivity, utilize hours efficiently and safely, those type of things. But then also for down the road developmental purposes. So what can we take, maybe what has a certain function or feature that we really like that we think we can apply to something we already have or something we think we're going to develop. So I think there's always that continual evolution of a product or a process so that we can always continuously look to improve and better maybe something we do or look to do in the future.
I've kind of created a bumper sticker, I don't know how long ago now, that says simply, technology will not be denied. In other words, once the technology is presented now, it's pretty much a given that that technology is going to be adapted and very quickly by a lot of people. Now, that particular piece of technology, that particular widget may not be successful, but somebody else, like maybe 13,000 other people, have the same idea that they're massaging. They see what happened. What I'm getting at is the technology is going to continue to flow through. Tim, there's one piece of technology, though, that's flesh and blood in these trucks, and that, of course, is the driver. And where is the driver right now?
The driver is obviously still very, very important, and I think what we're seeing is the driver has been impacted, in the last particularly 3, 4, maybe 5 years in a number of ways, and what they can actually do on their own, how they can use their own smarts. Meaning, I think they've really lost a lot of the freedoms, whether it's through some changes in regulation, and we have another one coming right now, around the corner with the ELDs. It was the hours of service, 6, 7, 8 years ago first, and now the ELDs. Whether it's other technology out there that is taking maybe some things away from that driver, and then maybe it's the industry and demands of the industry itself. The way the supply chain is becoming what I'll say much more precise and data hungry out there. There's a lot of our customers out there that are wanting information and decisions to be made that normally we'd leave up to the driver. And so I think what we're looking at is how do we take technology and still make sure that driver is the lead technology and the truck is the primary decision maker, but how do we help them now with other technology to kind of counteract some of the, I'll call it the freedom or the flexibility that's been taken away from their own autonomous decision making out there. And unfortunately that's sort of the way the world has evolved. As you said, when technology comes out, someone's going to adapt it, someone's going to find a use for it, and sometimes that's taking those decisions away from us as people, and that's certainly not unique to our industry, but certainly has impacted our industry.
It's all done under the umbrella of efficiency and productivity, and of course we'll put a nice layer of frosting on that cake and call it safety. You know how that works, but that's not where I'm going. The acceptance of technology, of course, is one thing, but the necessity for it is something else. It seems as if the logistics supply chain is like a living, breathing thing that is demanding data. We're shoveling data into that thing like Casey Jones shoveled coal into the boiler, and everything is based on data now. Jeff, what I was going to ask you is, when it comes down to it, whether you want to or not, everybody's become data-driven. What are some of the decision-making processes you make in terms of adapting a technology? Because it's big bucks. And do you kind of categorize the technology? Like, do you have technology or software even that might address efficiencies and productivity, and then maybe something else that affects hours of service and driver downtime and maximizing miles? And then you got the safety technologies too. How do you pigeonhole some of that stuff and decide which one you're going to adapt?
Right. So what we kind of group it in different suites. So we have, our optimization software, our operations dispatch software, and I'll touch on that here in a second. But then we have kind of our, we mentioned a little bit about the back office support. So we have some stuff that involve, setting up, especially my area of what I do, setting up dedicated fleets and setting up different various opportunities for drivers and for our customers. And then there's a third grouping that has essentially what we would call just a straight communication. So combining pieces of data that exist and have existed for a long time, and just grouping them in a way that is easily acceptable, readable, understandable, so kind of gets everybody on the same page. But kind of touch on that operations software that started with. So what we do is we take, obviously we have e-logs, and we know our customer data. So what we try to do in an effort to improve efficiencies and improve ultimate productivity and try to utilize our drivers' hours efficiently and make them as productive as possible, we feed all this information in with our trip information, our customer data, our drivers' hours, and then we use basically an average transit calculation to try to estimate how long a piece of freight should take to get on and off. Maybe we look at that next load and say, okay, maybe it's best that we take a 12-hour break as opposed to taking a 10 and starting your day, just to try to utilize those hours efficiently and ultimately at the end of the week, month, year, improve that bottom line for the driver, and then also set ourselves up to be successful from a service standpoint as well.
Well, that's pretty interesting. That is pretty interesting. Tim, when Jeff was speaking there for just a moment, I was kind of picturing things in terms of who, okay, back in the good old days, and maybe they were never such days, but, you had your three essential links in the supply chain. You had your shipper, you had your carrier, you had your receiver, and everybody kind of just did their thing to the best of their ability. If a guy got it in your trailer as quick as he could, you got it over to the other guy as quick as he could, or you could. They unloaded it as quick as they could, and of course circumstances prevailing, no 2 days or no two deliveries are ever alike and all of that. But it seems as if now the supply chain itself is becoming a motivating factor, almost a slave driver in a sense, to where who needs to know where that widget is through the entire life cycle of the widget? Tim, that's what I've never been able to figure out. What entity is it in the supply chain that has caused this incredible rush towards integration and for maximization, at the risk of kind of just, boy, I hate to use the word disrupt, but it's kind of disruptive.
We ask ourselves that same question every day, because sometimes we ask the same thing. Is there really a need to know every second through this widget's life cycle exactly where it is and when it's going to be somewhere? Certainly in some applications there is that need, and I think the two things that we have seen that are really driving that, one maybe a little bit more real, is the inventory controls, just-in-time inventory, and companies wanting to manage their overall expense. I mean, there's been a lot of pressure on companies in the last 4 or 5 years, given the economy and some outside factors coming in with some companies that have come into the U.S. and taken over some companies and really trying to drive out any costs. And so that you kind of have an understanding, but I also think there's somewhat of a false demand out there, driven really by what we talked about before, technology too, and what we all see every day as consumers. If I order something online today, I get to look online and I get to track every single step of that order. When the order's processed, when the product's being picked, when it's being boxed, when it's given to a parcel carrier, and then along that parcel carrier route, you're seeing where it's at. You're going to see exactly what time it's got to the city you live in, and then when it's going to deliver to your house. So I think people see that and they say, well, hey, as a consumer, that's kind of cool. So why can't I have that with my whole truckload of widgets? And so we got.
Oh, you mean every one of those little guys?
Right. And so there is that demand that's out there, and unfortunately, or fortunately, we work with our customers and try to meet that demand as much as we can. But again, that level of visibility and precision is something, in the truckload industry, it's hard to put the number of variables and factor that into there. We were talking before, this weekend was quite the weekend for weather. It was probably hard, 7 days ago to predict exactly what the weather was going to do to some loads of widgets crossing Kansas or Texas or Missouri, with just the different weather that they had in those various states. And so to provide that level of precision beforehand is difficult, but then during the load you could say, okay, well, I'm giving you that level of precision, but what could have I really done about it? And so it's working through that and balancing that with customers. But as we talked at the beginning here, looking at, well, what's the impact of that on the driver? Because now you have that visibility, and we're going to have more of our customers asking, well, what can you do differently to get that widget here faster? Or can you talk to your driver and have them do something different versus what as you mentioned, the way it used to be is you had the shipper, the carrier, and the receiver, and us as a carrier, once we routed, gave the driver his dispatch, we relied on the driver to be very independent in making a lot of those decisions. Today, that's a lot different. Not because we wanted to take that freedom away from the driver. We don't trust the driver. It's really, as I mentioned, the demands that we now have from customers and the regulatory changes that require that.
Wow, yeah, we must follow the widget along the way. It's almost like playing an extension of a video game when you really think about it. I mean, we're actually doing the same thing, tracking our widget, as we are guiding Mario through wherever. Oh, excuse me, that's a text. My widget's going to be here at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. Geoff, Tim talked about something, and I kind of joke around about automated trucks are coming, weather permitting. Weather. Tim is right. What a weekend, man. You know, it was everything all at once, unexpected on top of all of that. How has the technologies that you have now helped you to get drivers out of the way or ahead of the game, or to wait behind the front in terms of how to handle weather? It's got to be light years ahead of where it was, say, 10 years ago even.
Yeah, and I think there's even more development that we're currently in process, hopefully to get a little more predictive modeling, essentially, out of it, to know that, hey, there's a certain amount of risk. So use the Kansas example from this weekend to say there's a 80% chance that there's going to be snow and ice, and you know, the roads are going to be unsafe. So either we stop, or we can take an alternate route. And actually a piece of software that we're currently working with is in process to try to develop some of that technology out to say, before we even pick up a load, or before we even go somewhere, you know, there's a chance that along that route line there may occur an event, a weather-related event of whatever magnitude, and it kind of weights that out to say, hey, this is something that's not going to be a very big deal, or something that could potentially be a very big deal, and that way that would allow us to route our drivers safely around that, or to say, hey, let's just leave that load where it sits and we'll do something else, so we can make some of those decisions on the front end. Versus, hey, I'm already in Kansas and it's icy and I have to shut down. So if we can avoid that.
You know, you're pointing up something, Geoff, that I think is really significant here. Tim, everything he just said that they do, they could have done on paper with atlases and maps and phones, you know, Western Union or whatever. The idea isn't that the quality of information and analysis hasn't always been really great. It's that now you can get it in a nanosecond, as opposed to, like, I'll get back to you in a couple of hours, which was the best you could do.
Absolutely, and you know, that type of instant data, instant information is you know, is present now throughout the supply chain and throughout our lives. If you think about it, I mean, as you mentioned, you got a text before from somebody that you know, not too many years ago it had been picking up the phone and calling you, or sending you a letter or something else. We have that in our whole lives, so there is that expectation now that we operate that way, and that you know, we provide our customers information that way, and you know, at a point I think it's going to become the expectation of drivers too, that we as a company support them that way. Hey, you should be able to give me this information quickly so I can make the adjustment I need to do, so I can make a better informed decision as a driver. So that as we look at technology, we're looking at all the people it will impact, and how can we do that. But at the same time, what we have to be real careful of is, so there are, as you mentioned, there's like weather, for example. It's not an exact science. There are you know, variables that come into play, just as with many other things. We have to ensure that the technology, the modeling, the other thing has a high enough degree of accuracy that we're not providing a lot of false positives, because then our drivers are going to no longer think, well, I got the information quickly, but it's not valuable. Our customers are going to think, well, I got the information quickly, but it's not reliable. So that's another balance we have here. Certainly data about something that's already happened, we can, that's real, we can transfer that quickly. Data about what's going to happen, there are some assumptions that have to be made, and so how we make those assumptions, what the software models do, and the variables they put in there, that's a real challenging part. It's getting better every day. The more data you have, the better that model typically is, and so that's something Geoff and his team work through a lot, is these models and how accurate are they, and because the last thing we want to do is provide a lot of false positives out there, and then people don't think the data is valid, or they don't think the model is good, or they don't like technology, because as you said before, technology is there. It will continue to evolve. It will continue to change. So we don't want to shut people off to it. We just need people to know that it's not perfect. It's a lot better than maybe when it was 10 years ago. We just need to continue to evolve with it.
Yeah, the need for speed. Sometimes you have to have some substance to go along with that and slow that down. You know, we have that need for speed in this industry, in the media, whereby how many times have you seen a story where a number of people were injured or killed or involved, and this, you know, the numbers bounce all over the place. At least 3 people, at least 7 people. Now it's 5 people, and the rush to get information out, it really skims over the details. So I guess the devil is in the details, Geoff, in terms of how some of this technology works, and does it always play well with others?
Yeah, and we spend a lot of time to see what's accurate, what's real, and then, you know, that's kind of from a data standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's also, what do we do with it? You know, how do we leverage that to ultimately make whatever we are working on better? You know, maybe that's more productivity, maybe that's a better service, maybe that's a different opportunity, whatever that may be. Maybe it's a safer route. But, you know, there's a lot of background and a lot of people that put in a lot of time just to verify the accuracy of that information. And then another set of people that say, okay, what are we going to do with it? What's the action? Because we can have great technology and we can have all these different tools, and at the end of the day, if we can't execute any actionable decisions off of that, it doesn't serve its purpose.
You don't let the data dictate. You use the data as a part of a tool to develop a formula to create a solution. The data is there for using, but the data can very easily become the predominant thing. Well, I've got the data to back that up, and that's sort of like kind of a CYA thing, I guess, to a great degree. I really appreciate what you had to say there, Geoff. I wish I had the opportunity to appreciate some more of what you'll have to say, but we're out of time here. But I hope you'll come back. Geoff Humphrey, the Director of Dedicated and Regional Fleets at Crete and Schaefer. Geoff, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And Tim, thanks for bringing Geoff to the program. Thanks for being here yourself this morning.
You're welcome. Certainly, we're in a changing world. Unfortunately, sometimes more and more data-driven. Fortunately, sometimes more and more data-driven. But, you know, I think we need to find that balance between data and real world, and that's what we're working hard on every day.
Understood. Tim Aschoff, President of Schaefer, Executive Vice President, COO of Crete Carrier, and Geoff Humphrey, once again, Director of Dedicated and Regional Fleets. That was a almost philosophical discussion on technology. I really appreciate the insight and the depth at which those guys can speak about stuff like this. It's about time for news and weather as we continue Tech Talk with TMC coming up in the next hour.